Chris Cleave has the knack of writing really topical novels. His first, Incendiary, was about the impact of a terrorist attack on the mother of a small boy. His second book, The Other Hand, was about the plight of refugees. Now, in Gold, he tells the story of rival cyclists challenging each other in the build-up to the London Olympics. Chris, welcome to Booktopia.
Thanks.
Were you a sports fan before you wrote Gold?
I wasn't a sports fan at all before Gold. I became fascinated by athletes because they have a life of such extremity. I was interested in the dedication. I was interested in the desire to win. Because as a writer, we don't necessarily have that. It's not a competitive job. No one else has to fail in order for us to do our best work. And that's not the case for athletes. They have to destroy other people's dreams in order to achieve their own. And I just thought that's such a dark dynamic to explore.
And it's a particularly dark dynamic in a way to explore between women. You love writing female characters. I think most of your protagonists have been female characters in your previous books. What is it about writing about women that appeals to you so much?
Two things. First, it means I'm not writing about myself. I've always set out to be the kind of writer who'll go and find a story about people who live on usually the margins of our society and report back. I'm not a purely introspective novelist, so writing from a female point of view started for me as a process of making sure it wasn't about me. So I made a rule that I would cross a boundary of gender or of ethnicity or of sexuality every time I picked up the pen. I wanted to be someone else. But then it became really addictive. Writing from the point of view of the other gender is really fascinating. It's a good mental gymnastic, and I think a very healthy one, to effortfully imagine yourself into those other shoes. It's interesting because it makes you see things that you couldn't see before. That's never been more pointed for me than in the case of this novel about athletes. I realised that female athletes do a lot of stuff that I hadn't realised before. And looking at it from a male point of view, I just thought female athletes and male athletes were contemporaries and there wasn't much difference between male and female sport. Actually, when I came to write it from a woman's point of view, you realise that female athletes are doing a lot more. They are arriving at the absolute peak of their physical prowess. They're reaching the top of their game in sport at exactly the point where friends, family, partners, society is asking the question, oh, are you going to settle down and have a kid? Right. And when a male athlete decides to become a parent, he might miss a week of training. When a female athlete decides to become a parent, she might miss a season or 2 seasons out of a career, which at the elite level might only be 5 seasons long. It's a big deal. And so these women are making big choices that men don't have to make. It's a more committed life. It's a vocation which they live with more commitment. They live it absolutely.
All your books include children. They are a feature of the 3 novels. So what's the interest for you about writing about children?
All of my books have a question at the heart of them. And they're ethical questions, really, that I pose to my characters. So in The Other Hand, the question is, how far should we step outside our comfort zone in order to help someone else into it? In Incendiary, the first novel, about loss and bereavement, the question is, well, can you ever really rebuild your life once your heart has been properly and irrevocably broken? With Gold, the question is, what comes first, our ambition or the people we love? These are big questions, and I have a child at the centre of actually all 3 of those books, because for me that's a reason to care about whether the adult protagonists arrive at the right answer to that question. Adults in a room talking with each other, who cares? If they come up with the right decision or the wrong decision, they have only themselves to blame, and only they will have to suffer the consequences. I love children. I love their absolute moral stance on issues. I love the vitality they bring to life, and I'm aware of their extraordinarily precious vulnerability to the consequences of the decisions that the adults around them make. And for me, it's so important for the adult protagonists to make the right choices for the sake of these children at the centre of the books, who are my favourite characters always in the piece.
Do you choose these ethical subjects as things that are topical from the news, from what you're hearing as part of the public conversation around you?
I start with questions that I think are timeless. I mean, the moral questions don't have a sell-by date, and they're not questions that I pick from a sort of encyclopedia of ethical dilemmas. I don't sort of stick a pin in and think, oh, now I'll do this one. The questions are things that grab me. You know, gold, for example. What comes first? The thing you're passionate about, or the people you're passionate about? It's a horribly difficult question. People call that work-life balance, or but actually it's this timeless question of what am I going to do? Change the world or live in it? These are both equally beautiful things to do, and that became a more and more acute question in my life. So I write about these things that eat me up. I'm compelled to address that question because I don't have the answer to it, and the questions are timeless. But then I try to find a situation which is timely, in which I can pose that timeless dilemma. So yes, I'm consciously looking 2 years ahead of where I'm writing and thinking at the point of publication, what is going to be on people's minds? And how can I tell the backstory of the thing that's going to be on people's minds in 2 years' time? And how can I put my timeless question in that timely fashion? So.
Did you sit down, Chris, and think about this the moment that London was announced as being the winner of the 2012 Olympics?
Yeah, absolutely.
You were strategic about it.
Well, I was involved in it. It's my home city. And so, yeah, on the 6th of July 2005, they announced that the greatest show on earth was coming to my hometown. Yeah, I'm going to cover it. I knew right then that I would cover it not as a journalist, which is another of my hats, I guess, but as a novelist. As someone who's afforded the time and space to explore the backstory behind the big story.
Because I guess that wasn't exactly a moral dilemma, but London was very polarised, wasn't it, between the pro and the anti-Olympics factions. So how did you feel about the fact that, as you say, your town was getting the greatest show on earth?
Well, in typical me fashion, I started out being really cynical about it. The novel I wanted to write, when I set out, I was going to follow the money trail. Right? I was going to say, well, who's going to get rich out of this? Because it offended my sense of justice that all of these young people are working their guts out to represent their country for glory, for passion, for love. And behind it, there are all of these people getting cushy government contracts. They started out being an angry little novel.
About a different kind of gold altogether.
Yeah, totally different. And then, the more I researched the athletes, the more time I spent with them, the more time I trained with them, the more I began to understand how important what they do is, the more all of that other stuff faded into the background, and I felt it was not important. Of course there will always be money men, of course there will always be politicking going on behind the scenes, of course anything that big is going to have a dark side. But there wasn't, in the end, what I found beautiful. And I ended up writing a really different kind of book, about these people whose lives I felt I could just quite uncomplicatedly celebrate. I liked the athletes. I loved this promise that they renew in each generation. Swifter, higher, stronger. It's worth doing. it embodies everything that's the opposite of death and decay and entropy, you know. The opposite of what's happening to me, you know, as a person, you know, for this physical decay that we all experience as people.
Well,
it's worth fighting against.
Most people are never going to be even aware of their peak if they have one, whereas these athletes are calibrated to such a degree that that peak has such a narrow window to kind of exploit, and you really capture that very, very well. The urgency and the fact that you've really probably only got one or maybe two chances at this.
But it's so right and really nicely put, yeah. It's about people living in time. They are competing against each other to achieve dominance in that 1/10,000th of a second, where their whole life comes to an acute focus. They've achieved their potential in that 10,000th of a second, at that time, in this unrepeatable moment every 4 years, where you're either ready or you're not.
You talked about training with athletes, so what did you do?
Oh, it's really interesting. I mean, I come from a baseline of being neither fit nor unfit, neither athletic nor markedly unathletic, and I'm just completely average. And I was interviewing athletes a lot to get into their psyche, and I would ask them these simple questions like, you know, how does it feel to win a race that you've invested everything in? You know, you've basically put all of your chips on red. How does it feel to win? And they would say things like, "Oh, it's indescribable," which is, you know, as a novelist, that's not very helpful. But it's true, you know. And so I had to go out there and experience it so that I could describe it. And so I got myself a coach, and I went through a really intensive athletic training program for 6 months. I was doing 20 hours a week of really quite high intensity training. Because I do feel that, you know, a novelist should do their research, and I don't do it on Google and Wikipedia. Wonderful those services are. I go out there and live it, and because I feel that unless I live the lives my characters are living, my writing will not have the authenticity. You know, I won't be able to look people in the eye and say, yeah, this novel is worth 8 hours of your time, because I've gone out there and found out about a thing that we didn't know about before. So, and this is about the body. It's about this domain where novelists don't usually go. Right? So I had to find out.
Thank you very much, Chris Cleave.
Thank you so much.
Once the Olympics have faded from our screens, we really tend to forget about them, except for perhaps a couple of favourite highlights. But gold is an enduring experience. You don't have to be a sports fan to enjoy it, and it'll make you think about winning and what it takes to win in a whole new way.